Welcome into Hockey Sense, everybody. How are we? It's another week closer to the NHL draft. Do you feel things starting to happen, starting to evolve as we get close to the most exciting time of the year, at least for the teams who are outside of the playoffs? You want to get to the draft. You want to find out what your team is going to look like next season. What kind of moves will be made throughout the course of this offseason between now and the draft, and then obviously getting into free agency. Can't wait to see what's in store for all 32 teams in the National Hockey League. Hockey Sense, brought to you by First Community. As always, check out First Community, firstcommunity.com. Find a bank branch near you. They're all over the place. St. Louis First Community has won national awards, recognized as the #1 credit union in the region, and for good reason. So they've got lots of options, lots of banking options for you, whether you're looking to save for a vacation, save for a holiday spending, you want to open up a youth savings account to teach the young people in your lives the value of money. How do you save money? Have them understand money at a very young age. And also that Little Blues program, the best program going for your son or daughter that wants to get into the game of ice hockey. Nobody does it better than First Community with that Little Blues program. So do that and do that today. Great to have you with us. Shane Malloy is going to join us. He is a draft guru for NHL Network Radio. You hear his show, Prospects Radio, on the weekends on NHL Network Radio on Sirius XM. Director of scouting and analysis for the Pro Hockey Group. He put together a list. It's interesting because he now has Ivar Stenberg dropping down to 3. Chase Reed has now surpassed him. He's in the 2 hole as the #2 rated prospect, according to Shane Malloy. So now Ivar Stenberg, he's dropping a little bit. And I got to say this about Stenberg. And I like him an awful lot. He is a hell of a player. And there's a reason why he's widely considered the #1 European prospect going. And most draft pundits have him as high as #1 in some cases. We had, we've had a couple of different people on to talk draft here on Hockey Sense, brought to you by First Community. And both of the analysts that we've had on so far that are talking specifically the draft have had Ivar Stenberg as #1 on their board, ahead of Gavin McKenna. But now Shane Malloy, who's going to come on today, has him falling all the way down to #3. Interesting. Can't wait to get into that with Shane. In terms of Blues news, again, not a whole lot going on. I think you're going to hear an announcement very, very soon about the coaching staff. That is done, from what I understand. They've hired their coaches, and we'll let them make that announcement, and I would imagine it'll be coming very, very soon. No real contract stuff to get into. Georgi Romanov, the goaltender, who really just kind of caught fire there in the playoffs for Springfield down in the American Hockey League, playing under Steve Ott. I believe he's going to be coming back here with the organization. I think there's some momentum there on a contract extension. Probably be a high 2-way. But that's your #3 goaltender for the Blues. And if they're signing him as a #3 at this stage, I think all signs point towards Jordan Binnington coming back here to St. Louis. I've said that from the very beginning. I've been very consistent about that. Now, one trade can certainly knock your socks off and change things very, very quickly, and could lead to Binnington no longer being a part of the Blues organization, at least now as a player. But I just don't see that happening. We'll see how things play out. But look for Romanov to get a deal done here with the Blues and, be the Blues' 3rd goaltender. I know Will Cranley signed, and, people get a lot of, very excited about that. Listen, he has been a good story this past season, played some very good hockey, but he is a #4 right now. If you wanted to rank it in the organization of where he's at, he would be your 4th goaltender. Certainly wouldn't be your 3rd. So Hofer, Binnington, and then Romanov, Cranley. I think those are going to be your 4 goaltenders heading into next season, and we'll see how that plays out. But again, the 2 assistant coaches, expect an announcement, a formal announcement on that very, very soon. I'm told that it is done, and we'll just wait and see when they want to make that announcement. So I know Dylan Larkin is a guy that everyone's talking about. Matt Barzal. Listen, I'd love to get my hands on Barzal. Larkin is a really good player, as we know. But I just feel like there's red flags with Larkin, and maybe I'll get more into this on Cam and Strick for our next recording that we put out. Being the captain of that team, I know they've been in a long rebuild, and then they missed the playoffs this season where they really had no excuse to miss the playoffs. They just completely bottomed out and just crashed down the stretch. He had an injury. That didn't help. But I don't hear all great things about Dylan Larkin. Great American-born player, obviously a gold medalist, part of USA Hockey in the Olympics. But with all that being said, his reputation as a leader and as a teammate, the more you dig into it, is not clean. It's not all that great or as good as you would expect it to be when you really start talking. So I know every Blues fan is like, oh, can we get Dylan Larkin? Can you trade Jordan Kyrou? Well, first off, these guys have no trade clauses. I don't see St. Louis being high on their list to come to, considering they just missed the playoffs. This guy's trying to go to a team where he feels like he could win, where sometimes that bothers me a little bit. You're the captain of the team. You grew up in the area, and I know he's never played outside of Michigan before because he went to Michigan. He went to the National Team Development Program prior to that, grew up in Michigan. But wouldn't you want to see it through? I mean, how rewarding would that be if all of a sudden you're the captain when you finally do get into the playoffs, when you finally are able to contend? And so now you're bailing out on the organization now, and I don't blame him at the same time. I mean, I'm just not a big fan of the way everything is going with the Red Wings. And you just wonder when that heat is going to start falling on the shoulders of Steve Yzerman. And if it hasn't already, I think it has. But all I'm saying is with Larkin, I don't want to go too deep into it because I do like him as a player. I like him as a player more than I love him as a player, if that makes sense. But as somebody put out on social media last night, he's played more games in the Olympics than he has in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And as the leader of the Red Wings, I don't know how you would look at his tenure with Detroit. So maybe it'll be a blessing in disguise. Barzal, a little bit of a different story. Remember watching him in the playoffs a few years back, and he was just absolutely incredible. I'd take Matt Barzal. We'll see how all of that plays out with the Blues. Simone Nemec from New Jersey, who's asked for a trade. Again, red flags. Whenever you have a player who's on an entry-level contract, who's played 150 games in the National Hockey League, who's asking for a trade, I'm sorry, I want nothing to do with him. I really don't. That's just a red flag for me. Why are you asking for a trade 2 years into your NHL career? Like, help me understand that. You're still on an entry-level deal, a rookie deal, and you're asking for a trade. Talent, sure, but no thanks. I know there have been a couple of teams who tried to make a deal happen with New Jersey to get Nemec over there, and the asking price was just too high. And I would imagine the asking price for Dylan Larkin is going to be very, very high as well. I would imagine a couple first-round picks maybe, and a prospect, first-round pick and a roster player. Like, Detroit's going to try to win. They still want to win. I don't know if they're just looking for prospects. They have enough of those. They need guys who can really help that team win. And so, again, John Gibson, who they brought in as their goaltender last year, spent obviously his entire career with Anaheim. I like Gibson a lot, but I don't love him. I felt like every time I saw him play live, he just didn't have a good game. Not a whole lot of winning experience. And then you bring him on board, and he showed flashes, but he just wasn't able to get the job done. I do want to say this about the game last night. Game 2 last night, Carolina and Vegas. What a game. I was so down on Carolina during the game. I mean, there's 10 minutes to go in the third period. They had nothing going. I cannot believe they won that hockey game. I really can't. I can't believe they won that hockey game. They couldn't get to the inside. They couldn't get the puck to the net. They just looked like they had to try so hard just to create a quality scoring chance for themselves, and it just wasn't going. And then they felt like they were maybe losing energy a little bit. Um, Vegas was just suffocating Carolina. They were beating Carolina at their own game, really. There was no room. There was nothing for Carolina. And then Logan Stankoven, man. You know, it's all about effort for me. He's just such an effort player. And for a small player like him to win a puck battle below the goal line, get the puck back, and then make something happen. I know it went off of a Vegas defenseman, but still, just the effort. And now you get the crowd into it, you get the bench into it, all the boys are into it, and now you're back into the game with 10 minutes to go, or just under 10 minutes to go in the game, and shortly thereafter, they tie it up. Bonehead decision, in my opinion, to challenge the no goal by John Tortorella. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know what information they were given on the bench that would make them think that there was any way possible that they were going to win that challenge. There was no way. First off, they waved it off immediately. So it was ruled a no goal on the ice. Certainly a turning point. Carolina takes the lead, and you assumed the game was over, but then I didn't like the call on Jackson Blake either. On the interference call on Barbashev. Barbashev's kind of coming right. He just kind of stuck his ass out a little bit. I don't know. You going to call that in a playoff game, Stanley Cup final, in a one-goal game with 3 minutes to go? I'm not. So I didn't love that call. Carolina kills it off. For those of you who didn't watch the game, most of you probably know this, but you thought maybe now the game was going to end and Carolina would be able to seal it with an empty net goal, but a great job by, I think it was Marner who got the puck to the front of the net, and Mark Stone is as good as you're going to find in that situation, even though they had a little bit of luck. I think it went off a Slavin's stick. And then Seth Jarvis wins it in overtime, and I had been down on Jarvis. I'm like, where is this guy? Like, what does he do? Like, all this hype about these guys that you see that you don't watch play every single night, and then you watch them, and you're just so underwhelmed. And I get it. It's the playoffs. You cancel out good players. It's tough for the top players to just dominate. I thought Aho had a better game last night. I thought he was actually going to score. But, you're just waiting for guys like him and Jarvis to like, take over a game. Much like you see from Vegas' top players. You know what I'm saying? Like, Hurdle gets a big goal. Barbashev has been good. Marner's been great the entire playoffs. A little more quiet here in the Stanley Cup final. But obviously having a lot of success. So good for Seth Jarvis, man. Hopefully this, he can build off of this. I'm done hearing about his buddies all the day. His buddies are there, score goals. And that's what he did yesterday. He scored some goals. So good on Seth Jarvis. All right, we're going to dig into the NHL draft. We'll do that on the other side here on Hockey Sense. Shane Malloy is going to join us. You'll recognize his name from NHL Network Radio on Sirius XM. He's like their main draft analyst throughout the course of the 2-day event coming up in Buffalo, too. Really dialed into the NHL draft. So I like to bring in different people and give their opinions and, provide what information they might have on the draft and certainly on the prospects for this year. Dirt Cheap Fun Fun, your one-stop party shop. One of our proud sponsors here in addition to First Community. Download that app and do it today. Find a location near you. If you live within 10 miles of a Dirt Cheap location, you get that delivery for free. So how nice is that? Dirt Cheap Fun Fun. Don't sleep on their party goods, their party supplies. Their walk-in beer coolers, incredible. Best selection of beer, wine, and booze anywhere. Dirt Cheap Fun Fun, your one-stop party shop, baby. Download that app today. Blue Note Roofing, 314-920-5713. You have storm damage, wind, hail damage, whatever it is, call them today and let them take great care of you. David Novak, man, he'll talk hockey with you all day long. He's unbelievable. Located in South County, they'll come anywhere. Get that free estimate. And if your roof is approaching 10 years of age or older, hey, sometimes these insurance companies won't pay for a new roof if it's older or 10 years or older. So if you're approaching the 10-year mark, get that new roof today from David Novak. Let him take great care of you. St. Louis Lawn Care. Man, my yard, it looks like Petco Park, I tell you that. I don't know why I always say Petco Park. I just think it's a beautiful ballpark. The grass is always perfect at Petco Park. in San Diego. That's how my yard looks right now because of our friends over there at St. Louis Lawn Care. So again, check it out. Check it out today. St. Louis Lawn Care. If you need your grass cut, anything, lawn mowing, fertilizer, they got a fertilizer program, sod installation, snow removal, mulch, aeration, overseeding, leaf removal, mosquito and bug control. Take advantage of that. Are you kidding me? Nobody wants bugs in their backyard. We just got a hot tub, by the way, from Spas and More. You hear Jamal Mayers talking about Spas and More. Jammer's not going to be able to join us today either, I don't believe. Unfortunately, everyone's schedules are kind of all over the place right now, but we'll get him back on. Next week, we may be out. I'm scheduled to go on vacation. There's some family issues going on right now, too, that may prevent me from being able to do that. So we may be picking up the show 2 weeks from today as we get closer to the NHL draft. And again, I'll be in Buffalo, recording live from Buffalo when we do the show on June 26th, right? That is the Friday. But St. Louis Lawn Care, give them a call today. Let them come cut your grass. New ownership, great people, 314-974-5911. And of course, Lordo's Diamonds, right there in the heart of Ladue, 314-432-8008. 314-432-8008. For Lordo's Diamonds, get that special someone something special in your life over at Lordo's Diamonds. Engagement rings. And all the guys out there, if you're looking for new watches, man, a great selection of watches and chains, but they are unbelievable when it comes to customer service. You walk in there with a $100,000 budget or a $100 budget, you're going to get treated exactly the same. They're incredible people. Mike and Jimmy Lordo, they've been doing this for 70 years, right there in the heart of Ladue, right next to Truffles. You can't miss it. Call them, make an appointment if you want to, 314-432-8008, or just stop on in, and they will greet you with open arms. They're like family inside of there. And also, Mako in Kirkwood, locally owned since 1982. You know what they specialize in? Cosmetic collision repair, auto painting, fully capable of repairing any collision damage. But they focus on drivable repairs and drivable hits because that allows them to turn around the repairs as quickly as possible. So they've got a working relationship with all insurance providers, all fleet management companies. They give you the free written estimate. You can schedule on the phone. You can do it online or just stop by Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. to 5 p.m., baby. Mako offers the best price guarantee, nationwide warranty on all Class A insurance repairs, as long as you own the vehicle. But when I say drivable, like if your car's totaled, like they're probably not going to be able to turn around that very quickly. But if you got a couple of dents, you have some damage, that you can still drive the car and get it to Mako, they'll take care of it for you. I love it. Mako in Kirkwood. Choose Mako and do it today. All right. Shane Malloy, we're talking NHL draft on the other side. I'm Andy Strickland. This is Hockey Sense, brought to you by First Community. Thanks for hanging out. It's our Friday tradition here at Half Coast Studios, baby. All right, Shane Malloy is with us. Man, listen, I hear your voice. My son, he's now 10, so he's playing 10U hockey here in St. Louis for the AAA Blues. Great program here in St. Louis. You're probably familiar with the AAA Blues program with all these kids that have come out of St. Louis that you're following.
Yeah.
But when he was 6U, they would have practice every Saturday and Sunday at 6:45 a.m. And I would listen to Prospect Radio every weekend, man. We're driving to the rink Saturday and Sunday, just listening about the prospects. And we still listen to this day because it's not like when you get out of 6U that all of a sudden you have late practices. You always have the early practices. But you do a great job with that, man, and it's great to finally get you on the show.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, we're in our 21st year, so we've started since the beginning. So it's been, just grind along. You know, it's not sexy. It is what it is from that standpoint. So you go to games, you go to tournaments, you go to events. One of the things I had to learn really early is I never sat with the media when I go to games, unless I'm at an NHL game. So I'll go sit in the corner with the scouts and the player development guys and the player personnel guys. And the reason for that is they help you understand the game at a different level. Those were my mentors, which is one of the main reasons why I wrote the book, The Art of Scouting, is to pay homage to those guys.
Yeah.
In thanks of, because there's no school and there's no manual to learn how to scout. Honestly, Strick, I actually have found scouting, amateur scouting, harder than going to grad school. I'm not kidding. Right? And I just finished writing my PhD, so I just submitted my dissertation, and I think scouting is way more challenging.
Your
Like how many times I've said
your PhD is going to be in what?
decision making,
Okay.
operational efficiency. So I took 3 different disciplines: strategic leadership, cognitive performance, and behavioral economics.
Mhm.
And it's about decision making and operational efficiency, just the how, what, and why of decision making, so I could apply it to any different type of industry. I focused on NHL because it's what I know the best.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, no one will get to read it for a little while. It's an embargo, but eventually I guess the general public will get a chance to get a stab at it.
Yeah. I love it. And before I jumped on the TV side, when I was in the press box every game, I always sat down with the scouts too, man. I loved it. I just loved to like
Yeah,
pick
I
their
enjoy
brain,
being with the
talk
pro
hockey
scouts.
with them, intermission, hot stove in it. Yeah, so you made the right decision there. And it's funny because I love talking on the amateur side, and 2 of my closest friends in the industry are Jarmo Kekalainen and Billy Armstrong, 2 guys that ran the amateur side here in St. Louis for
Yes.
so long, who are now general managers. I wonder how much advantage you think that gives a general manager who truly has grinded it the way those 2 did on the amateur side as long as they did.
Well, I think there's benefits and potential downstream issues of that. One of the things is when you're an old school scout, is you still have an eye for it, and you still understand how to understand where signal and noise is, and you understand what your staff is going through
Mhm.
and the processes involved. However, I'll tell you a story. I wrote a strategic leadership paper on Dean Lombardi about understanding leadership, and he told me a story about where he put his fingers in the pie in a couple drafts and it blew up in his face.
Oh.
And once he sort of dismissed it, and the second time he's like, okay, I'm clearly the problem here. And you go, okay, what am I doing here? Like, who am I? I'm a lawyer by trade. So what are my best skill sets? To facilitate conversation and to build and destroy arguments. And so that's what I needed to do in that process. So we left Mike Futa and Marchinetti alone to do what they needed to do. And I think when you look at Jarmo and Bill, for example, they're excellent evaluators on the amateur side. And sometimes you have to recognize what your role is and allow your people to do their job. And your job is to ensure that all the data they collect and then how they're building out their profiles, that nothing's missing, that they checked all the boxes. And you look at it in a pie chart, like how much percentage goes in from all these different data sources, and did you guys do all your homework? And I think that's the biggest takeaway I have when it comes to general managers, is to remember what your role is, and you hire people to do their job and let them have autonomy to a large degree to make decisions.
Yeah, we'll get into the draft here, but I like this conversation also because when I was helping coach with our midget program with our AAA Blues here in St. Louis for 20 years. And you go to these showcases and, you have, USHL scouts that come by and they want to talk to you, North American Hockey League scouts. Depending on where you're playing, you have OHL scouts and whatnot. And they always want to talk to the head coach. Hey, give me some guys who you should pay attention to or who I should be watching, and that always bothered me. I'm always like, well, why don't you watch the game and then evaluate and then come back and talk to the coach and say who you like. And maybe the coach will say, listen, he had a good game, but you're probably not wanting to go down that road. And I feel like a lot of scouts immediately look at the negative, like scouting in general.
Yes. Yeah, we can get caught in that cycle of what's wrong with the player instead of, okay, how do we leverage these strengths? What are the strengths that we can leverage? And then how can we incrementally improve in player development, some of the areas that need to get to? And most of that, as you know, as a coach, and I've coached in the past, my son is 10, so he's in the U11 group, is trying to help to understand and appreciate is, okay, what are we leveraging? And then it's a long-term focus to slowly, incrementally improve, because it's really about off-puck game. Like, and I know people get tired of myself and Jason Bukla on the show talking about B game, B game, B game. But, some of the stuff that we've tracked is, on average, a forward may only have the puck 5% of the time they're on the ice. So if you're on for 20 minutes, you may only have it for 5%. The highest level player we tracked was at 8%, and that was Matt Barzal. So even if you're a defenseman, you might be 1 or 2% of the time you have the puck in your stick. So what are you doing off the puck in your B game, whether your team has the puck or not? Is how do you help your team win? So is that in your body position, in your puck support, in your forecheck, your back check? I say that to our forwards a lot on the team is, oh, you want to score goals? Okay. And I write it on the board, forecheck, back check, paycheck. Because if you want to get the puck back, that's where you're going to get it back. And then you have to back check to help your D so they can stand up, so they can move, so they can get that puck back as soon as possible. And sometimes young players are so puck focused, they don't realize what's going on off the puck and how absolutely critical that is to your success. And that's part of the processes that scouts go through. That's one of the things I had to learn. Funny enough, is one of my first mentors was a former St. Louis Blues scout, was Patty Janelle. So I lived in Calgary, and Patty and Lauren Davies, who was with the Edmonton Oilers, they were the first guys to help me out. So come in and sit beside me. And the rule was, I could ask them questions only when the whistle blew or in intermission. Other than that, you got to keep your trap shut when we're watching a game. But they would point things out. So it accelerated what I learned. So they were the first two people to help me. I've had numerous mentors, and the scouts have been great to me. Very fortunate. What I had to learn right away is, if they say things, you got to keep it quiet. You can never repeat them, because the minute you do, everybody's going to know, and you're not trustworthy. So I could probably write 5 books on things I'm not allowed to say.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. So you're based out of Calgary? Is that where you're based out of?
No, I lived in Calgary, then I went to Vancouver, and now I've moved out to the Maritimes because I'm at the University of New Brunswick. So that's where I'm finishing my degree.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, so that's interesting. And Matty Barzal, you talk about the 8%. That was his draft year when he had the puck for?
No, that was last year, last season in the NHL.
Okay.
So he had the highest percentage of having the puck on his stick in the ice time, only 8% of the time. So if he played 20 minutes, he had 8%. That's it. That's the max. So you really understand how little you actually have the puck in your stick.
Yeah.
So that allows me, when I'm watching a player coming into the draft, I focus so heavily on their off-puck game. Once I've established that they're capable of producing points, I want to understand how they produce points and why and where under like the most duress, because I'm trying to figure out their cognitive performance. Like, I'm trying to figure out, okay, under duress, how do you handle these situations? Because a lot of points in college, not necessarily in college, but in junior ranks, is fluff. So you can produce all these points on the power play, or they're at home against a team below 500 on the power play, and it's not translatable. So I want to see what you do on the road in back-to-back nights against teams above 500, 600, 700. Then I match up, okay, who did you play against? Then what did you produce? And what's your percentage of even strength points in those situations? Because the even strength play that translates to the American League and then to the NHL, because you can produce a lot of points on the power play, but how many of those players that are actually drafted will be on a first unit power play? It's very, very rare. So really, it's about what's your 5-on-5 production. That's really important, and it's translatable.
Okay, so sometimes I'll hear that you have some research when you compare scouting stats for different NHL teams and the success rate. And how you judge success rate based on number of draft picks that graduate to the NHL, how many games they play. And I know you probably don't have it all in front of you. Where would you put St. Louis? I mean, this isn't just a St. Louis show, but I'm just curious.
I have it.
And tell the people how you come up with this formula.
So what I did originally when I was starting I always heard narratives out there about, oh, this scout is great, or this scouting department's done an excellent job. I'm like, but there's no evidence to support that. I'm not saying they're good or bad, it's just there wasn't any evidence. So what I started doing is I had to build a criteria. So I ended up doing surveys with GMs and AGMs, and I was trying to figure out at what point in terms of games played, would you sign somebody off their entry-level deal, right, into a second contract? And I was using 160 games as a barometer, but what I found in the survey is about 80% of the GMs and AGMs were reluctant the minute I bumped it up to 200, it swung heavily to over 80% that they were happy. So it's just that 40 game extra play. So I used as a behavioral economics model of risk aversion, how you handle risk. I use that as the 200 plus games. And then I was trying to figure out, okay, when do players peak? Like when do they really hit it? And then I started talking to some people that were cognitive performance scientists, and this was back in 2006, 2007. And there's a guy who worked in insurance and actuarial science, and he said, well, the average age for when we drop our rates for men for our car insurance is 25. I'm like, well, why? Because the frontal lobe finishes developing for a man about 23, 24. Everybody's a little bit different, but that's around the age.
Sure.
So that's higher reasoning and decision making. So that's why I built that model of 200 plus games and draft plus 5, because you notice at the age of 23, players start to hit their prime. They start to spike. Even if they're an elite player, you see that 23-year-old year. You can go back and look at history. So that's why I use that as my criteria. And then I went back so I look at in the salary cap era from 06 to 15, first 10 years, the St. Louis Blues, and I'm just talking about quantity, not quality of players, just quantity. They had 110 picks, 30 players went on to play over 200 games, 27.27%. They were 12th overall. 12th overall is very, very good.
Yeah.
So they're very, like, in terms of quantity, they're good. They're a good team. They're consistently always there. And then 16 to 20, it looks like it's going to be very similar in that respect, even though the numbers have dropped. So they are one of those teams that I always find that they hit a lot of singles and doubles, and occasionally will hit a dinger. But
that's because they make the playoffs a lot, right? And they're drafting in the 20s in the first round. You know, they're not getting these top 5, top 10.
Dangerous.
Yeah.
I call it the 20s is dangerous. It's 23 to 32. I call it the death zone. So historically, if you look from the salary cap era, only 50% of the players drafted between 23 and 32 will go on to play more than 200 games. That's it. So it's a coin flip in there.
Really?
So if you do it exceptionally well there, that's a difference maker.
Yeah.
And then into your second and third round. So I always look at it from this perspective. If I'm judging an amateur staff, I want to know how great you've done or how good you've done in the second to seventh rounds. You should be able to hit on your first round picks. That should be a foregone conclusion in most cases. But what do you do in the second to seventh rounds? And that's where, you know, St. Louis does a really good job. They're one of the most consistent teams of hitting in, like, if I said, you know, how I would describe them, they're good. They're like an Oakland A's baseball player under Billy Beane in their heyday. Singles and doubles, and occasionally, like a Robert Thomas, they'll hit a dinger. And if they keep doing that, it's just they're accumulating assets. So when you have teams like them or LA, Washington, Capitals, Anaheim Ducks, they're always consistently hitting that. And a lot of the fanfare will go to the teams that will have these massive hits, and they'll get like 3 players in a draft, and oh my God, and there's all this excitement about it, and look at how great they're doing. But if you don't, what you need to avoid is having donuts. You can't go through a year with nobody, right? That really sets you back, because then there's all that sunk cost that you spent all that time and money, and you've got 0 players out of it. You just can't afford to do that. Even if the player's a third line player or a 5th and 6th defenseman, that is worth millions in your organization, because you don't have to go out into the marketplace and replace that, whether through free agency or a trade.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm really closely looking at the evaluation of teams. And I have probably somewhere between 300 and 400 pages of quant on every team, every region, every round, types of players, playing styles. I know where everybody's coming from in terms of probability. It's not perfect, but it's a probability. I live in a world of probability. What's the chance of this happening?
Can you watch a player and say that's a Washington Capitals player? That's a Buffalo Sabres type draft.
Yeah, you know, there are, like, the longer a group stays together, it's easier to figure out the type of attributes that they value. So whether it's Washington or LA or Anaheim or the St. Louis Blues have had the same group of scouts together for a long time, if you look back at their drafts, you start to see trends. Like everybody in the decision-making leaves breadcrumbs for you to look at. And I'm like, oh, okay, so you can sort of pinpoint certain style of players in certain positions that you go, okay, that seems to be a St. Louis Blues type player. So when they get drafted, you're like, oh, that doesn't surprise me, right? It's not a shock.
Yeah. What do you make out of goaltending? I mean, we see,
Oh God. Here
sometimes
we go.
you see a first round pick, but Joe Hofer, who's, you know, has a chance to be an elite goaltender. I mean, there's plenty of nights last year that he looked like one. Fourth round pick, Jordan Binnington, third round pick. I think Ben Bishop was a third round pick. You go back to when Bishop got drafted. So, you do get the first round pick as a goalie. Where do you stand on that? Would you take a goalie that high in the draft at 18 years of age? Would you draft one in the first round?
It would really depend on his cognitive performance, because 90% of what's going on with a goalie is between his ears. So I would want to be doing a tremendous amount of cognitive and psychological testing, because you need to understand how he handles duress. So his mental emotional attributes, what are his biases, what are his mental and emotional defaults, because you need the mental makeup of what they are so that you can build a profile understanding how he interprets information, how he handles stress, and then you can build upon that. The technical stuff, it's easier to work on, but the mental side for goalies is everything. So that's the direction I would go in. I fully admit I am not a goalie scout. I go get help in that regard, because I just don't have the technical understanding of, I don't know if their T pushes or their C cut is proper, or, their glove is too far out in certain areas, or if they're off balanced, they don't have midline balance in their skating, dynamic skating. So I don't profess to say that I can do that. So I go get help when it comes to goalies.
Is there
I don't want to say they're voodoo, but they're not.
No, I know. I hear what you're saying, and everything's so technical. Is their glove away from their body? Are their hands free? Are they on their feet when they should be? I mean, there's all that type of stuff that comes into play. Is there a goalie that'll go in the first round this year, you think, or no?
No, I don't think so. I think it mostly will be seconds. And I think the majority of goaltenders that go into second and thirds will come out of the Czech Republic or Finland or Russia.
Okay.
I had an interesting conversation with Miguel Yugoriev. He was drafted second round by New Jersey about the difference in how they train goaltenders when it comes to skating. And it was a really fascinating conversation for about 15, 20 minutes at the combine. And he was just talking about how they train their goaltenders in Russia in terms of how they skate. And he goes, I think that's the difference maker between us and most other goaltenders. And that's why you see a large number of Russian goaltenders in the NHL.
Wow.
He said that's the primary thing. Like, he goes, I think skating is the foundational piece for all goaltenders, along with your mental game.
No question. Because, and I see it on the youth side, and for years, a lot of parents were like, "Oh, my kid, he's not a good skater. He's not a very good out player, so I'm going to put him in goal." Right?
No, that's the opposite. You actually need your best skater to be your goalie.
Exactly. So you see that. It's interesting how you have Ivar Stenberg dropping to 3 in your rankings that I saw. Right? You had Chase Reed, who was at 2 ahead of him. Jason Bukala, who you just mentioned, we've had him on the show. He has Stenberg at 1. We've had other people who have had Stenberg at 1. When did he drop for you? Was that recent, or have you always had Reed ahead of him?
The difference is like, I do tiering. So I built I don't know if you knew that I worked for EA Sports for 18 years. So I did all the player ratings in the game by myself.
Really?
With no oversight and no safety net.
Like, if a player was a 91, that was you.
Everything was me. So it would be
every player in the league.
Every player in the NHL, every player in the American League, every player in the CHL, and all the World Juniors. That was me by myself. So what I had to do early on is I got tired of making the same mistakes because I had my biases. So I built a performance management system for myself to protect myself from myself, because I'm my biggest problem, right? As my wife likes to tell me, and she's 100% correct. So what I did was, in the system, is it allowed me to not repeat the same mistakes and use mental models and these different types of tools to be able to build out. So I built out a way to take all the information for my scouting, and then it built it into an automatic list. And what this list did was, based on how I weighted and what I valued, it would put out a list, but it would put it out into tiers. So what it did was, these tiers were bumpers for me. I could move the player around the tier, but I couldn't move them above or below. And I did that to protect myself. And so when I'm looking at 3 players like McKenna, Stenberg, and Reed, I have them in my top tier. So if you look at my list on the website, you'll see that tiering and the explanation behind it. And so I value defensemen higher than centermen and wingers. So if everything's being pretty much close to equal or close to like slim margins, I will always put the defenseman first. And the reason is it's based on scarcity and supply and demand. So if you look at the salary cap era, say from 06 to 2018, only on average, there's only 16 defensemen on average in a draft class, 16 to 17 that will play more than 200 games.
Wow.
So that there's scarcity in the marketplace. Then you look at what has happened in free agency and what do GMs and teams value, and then look at trade deadline. What do teams value? And it's always these defensemen. How much do they have to pay in the marketplace, whether it's a free agent or a trade, to get a defenseman who's a top 4? So I took all those lessons and that how they value players and applied it back to the draft. So like, look, if they're so valuable on the back end, why don't I just value them on the front end, bet like higher? So that's what I started doing. So you look at my list, and there's always this long run of defensemen, and it's because I'll take a basic defensive defenseman who will play a number 4 or 5 role, and I'll value him over a guy who's going to be an F8 and has some scoring ability, because defensemen are so rare.
But all these guys, like, Carson Carroll's, Verhoff, Reed, Smits, who I like a lot. I mean, if I turn around, this guy's playing.
I believe I have him 9th overall. So, and then that's the end of that second tier. And then I get into another tier
all
where
those
I have
guys that I mentioned, top 4 guys, though, for you?
Actually, they're top pairing. Every one of them except Reed. So. Reed is the one where I'll do a scale of probability of, okay, what's the probability of them playing 200 games in the NHL? And then I'll do another scale, say it's a defenseman, because we're talking about D, is in their prime years of 23, 24 to 31, how, like, in that scale of number 1 defenseman to number 6, what's the probability of where they're going to play throughout that? And if the highest level of probability, if I get over 50% as a D1, and then you check off all the boxes that I have to, you have to meet this criteria, then I'll put you as a D1. Chase Reed's the only one where I have over a 50% of playing the D1. The other defensemen in that tier group that we talked about, their higher probabilities as a D2, but they're still first pairing defense.
Yeah.
They're just not a number 1 defense.
I gotcha. And then you get into Gustafson and some of these other guys.
Yeah, who
is going to be a second pair, maybe. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like, I don't like to use comparables very often, but his stylistic comparable for Malte Gustafson reminds me of Matthias Ohlund. Like, he's a Viking, right? Like, give this kid 3-4 years to grow out into his body, and he's going to be 6'4" and 225, 230, but he's mobile. And, like, look at all the Stanley Cup winners other than Colorado. So you got your team in St. Louis, or you look at Vegas or Tampa Bay or any other team that's won Stanley Cups lately. Big mobile defense who take away time and space. The game's not really that complicated. It's about creating time and space and taking away time and space. So I want defense that are big and mobile, and a little angry would be nice. And if you got some one player who could really transition the puck well, or would be great if they could carry the puck. That's a nice balance inside of that. But I want 4 or 5 defensemen that are, ideally 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", in that range.
Has the evolution of Lane Hudson, Quinn Hughes, those type of, has that changed your opinion at all?
Absolutely not, because I went back and did a bunch of research on defense in the salary cap era again, and I found from 06 to 2018, I left the 19 and 20s out because there's still some players that haven't met criteria. I found there's only like 8 or 9 defensemen that are 5'11" or smaller that played more than 200 games. That's it. In 13 years. Wow. 9, right? So that tells you have to be, when I watch a small defenseman, especially if they're offensive, I'll look at them and go, okay, the offense part is checkmarked. Now I'm totally, at Christmas, I'm only focusing on their off-puck game. And I know this is a high barometer, but I'll use Jared Spurgeon. I'm like, can you defend like Jared Spurgeon? Right? If you're not a mean SOB like a Torrey Krug was, right?
Right.
Like he was a bit of a
competitive, yes.
Yeah, super competitive. But if you're a smaller D, can you defend like Jared Spurgeon? And if I go checking off these boxes, and if you don't have that capacity to do that, or like you look at a Brock Faber, then it's really difficult for you to be able to play over 200 games in the NHL. It's a really small margin. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. The difficulty and the problem with the Hughes of the world or like the Hudsons of the world, they're the outliers. They're a really small percentage. They're like 5%, right, of those small defensemen that actually pull this off. So you got to be really careful of not. I actually ignore them. Like, you're an outlier, so I ignore you because you're not the middle. And I just sort of set them to the side, and I look for the players that, could fit a certain criteria. So I do have a smaller defenseman up high in Ryan Lynn, who's 5'11", but he's also going to play at Denver University. And where players go in their development, the following year or 2 years matters in terms of how I value them. So I know he's going to a great program that's going to help him be a better defenseman, and that actually increases his value on my draft list. So inside that tier, if I know he's going there, it actually bumps up his value because I know he's going to be prepared as a pro when he turns pro, say at 21.
All right, a few more things for you, and it's great information, Shane. I appreciate it, man. The Matthew Tkachuks, the Pat Maroons. I mean, there's a lot of different players who don't play with a ton of pace, but they're very effective players. Matthew obviously, in a different category than Pat, but Pat played a long time and had a great career. But there's other players you'd put in that category as well. Is pace everything for you when it comes to scouting forwards, and can you overlook a player that's not super fast but has all the other attributes, specifically the brain, to be able to overcome that?
Two examples I'll use is Tyler Toffoli and then Mark Stone. So they're not particularly fast, but they understand how to skate the game, and that's two different things. Skating fast and skating the game. It's like a wide receiver who's super fast and can run a flag. But that's all they can do. They can't change and moderate their speed to understand what's going on around them. And that's what Toffoli and Mark Stone do exceptionally well. And Matthew Tkaczuk does the same thing, is they understand how to skate the game effectively to be where they need to be so that they have the puck support or to be able to attack a player, whatever the situation is. So they use their hockey sense to moderate their skating to be able to be an effective skater. And everybody thinks it's just because you're a fast skater. That's not true. Otherwise, I don't want to harp on a player, but remember Rico Fata. He was shot out of a gun. He was so fast. But what problem is sometimes you can skate yourself into a dead end.
Who was the first overall pick for Edmonton? I mean, the Russian kid. I'm forgetting. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about.
It's the same thing.
When he played here, I was like, if I just came watch a summer skate when he first came into town or watched him practice, I'd be like, this guy, who is that? He's unbelievable. And then you get him in a competitive 5-on-5 game,
and you don't know how to skate the game properly. And that's it's a lesson I had to learn, Andy, about what's valuable in skating. So I sat with a lot of guys, obviously Pat Malloy, who's a player development. He works with a lot of players, actually, particularly Tyler Toffoli. But then, with a guy like Glenn Dirk, he was a longtime scout for the New Jersey Devils, and his wife was actually a skating coach. So I learned a lot about how to evaluate skating and not to overlook just because somebody isn't particularly fast. It's like, okay, how do you skate the game?
Yeah.
And do you impact the game with your skating even though you're not fast? And I think Toffoli and Stone are perfect examples of, especially for young players who are worried about their skating. If you watch those two guys as an examples, or Matthew Tkaczuk, you can figure out how to skate the game effectively for your skating style and your body. And everybody's a little bit different because you can't reconstruct skaters. You can only make them a better version of themselves.
You see kids really improve their skating though, like from first year or junior to when they turn pro. Like, can they really?
They can't. A lot of it is depending on the player. It could be like a biometric issue, is like maybe there's too much force on one side or the other, or their hips are misaligned. And there is testing you can do to figure that out.
Sure.
And then it could be simply a power transition issue with the younger players. They haven't got into their man strength yet. So that, is off ice training and on ice training, because those two things have to be together.
Yeah.
You have to integrate those two things. You can't be in silos, because you'll misjudge a player and then give them the wrong training program. So that's why I spend a lot of time with people who work in those fields, because I'm trying to understand how to integrate all that information into not only the evaluation standpoint, but the player development. So when I worked for EA, I had to be a director of amateur scouting, a director of pro scouting, and a director of player development, because I had players that were 16 that had to rank at the CHL level, but then I had it all the way to the NHL. So there's this curve. So I had to understand how players went through that developmental cycle. It was a really steep learning curve. I phoned a lot of people, and I spent a lot of time watching video, and I spent a lot of time at the rinks asking a lot of questions because I had to learn how to ask better questions. That was a really big thing for me.
Sure.
Because I just sometimes you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So you're trying to figure out, like, what are the best questions I can ask so then I can understand what's really going on behind the scenes.
That makes sense. All right, so McKenna, Stenberg, you have McKenna at 1, Stenberg at 3. What separates the two?
Well, here's the question is, I look at a guy like McKenna, and could he put up 100 points a year for you? Yes. He's capable of that. That ceiling, 100, 110, he could do that. Stenberg, in his terms of stylistically, he's the type of player who would be willing to sacrifice points for the betterment of the team. So all of a sudden, could he go out with more offensive zone starts and not cheat, but put himself in better positions to get more points? Yes. But he's the guy who I think, I don't want to say he's mirroring Hossa, but stylistically, they're very similar in the fact that they'll sacrifice points and play a better off-puck game for the team to win.
Which they do naturally, which he does naturally, right? It's not forced, right? It's just the way he plays.
His habit.
Yeah.
His habits, his off-puck habits, habits over time equal behavior. So when I'm looking at players, I'm looking at what are your habits and how is that going to impact your behavior long-term? And so when I look at a guy like Stenberg, it's like, okay, I can project him to get 80 points a year because he's so talented, but he'll sacrifice points for the betterment of the team. And that's what certain guys will do that are similar in that style. So it's just a matter of, it's a trade-off. It's not better or worse. It's what are you trading off? And because players that can produce 100 points are so rare, again, that's that scarcity and supply and demand, that was the only separating point between those players. That was it. My margins were very slim.
So you have those two wingers. Then you get to Malhotra. How low could you see Caleb Malhotra, who you probably believe is the top center in the draft? How low could he fall?
We're slim. It's a slim margin between him and Bjork, honestly. It's very, very slim. And they're just different styles. So I was on Vancouver radio, and I used a style comparison to Trevor Linden for Malhotra. So I don't think he's probably getting past 7.
Okay.
Because, look, again, it's supply and demand of sentiment. It's so rare, right? And there's only I would say there's 4 centermen that could be top 2 line centers in this draft class.
You put Command in that category?
Yes, Command. Yes, I have Command actually number 10.
Because I
kind of Lawrence number 11.
See St. Louis. If St. Louis stays at 11 and he's there,
him and Tynan Lawrence, that's a possibility. What I really appreciate about both those players, but Command in general, and why I have him there, is he reminds me like a combination between Sebastian Aho and Michael Backlund. If you match those two players together, like, Command is my type of player. Like, I understand I have a certain styles that I gravitate towards because I think they provide better value off the puck and in the playoffs. So I look at styles of players that succeed in playoffs and I apply that back to my draft. So which is why I remember when the Finns were the rage and they had Puljujärvi and Laine and Aho in the middle, and Aho was the one that nobody really noticed. But then when you watch again the Swedes, you have like Bjork and Stenberg, and who was in the middle? Command. And who was stirring the drink there in terms of pace of play and defensive responsibility and making his players better because his puck was support and his stick placement and understanding how to play the game and manage the game? It was Command. So him and Lawrence, I think the margins for them are very, very slim. And then, so that's why I have those guys. That's the grouping. And then below that, I get into the next tiering is guys who I think will be number 3s. So you're getting into the Morozovs or the Danes. Like, you're getting in. I think those guys are big, strong, 2-way, third-line centers who are, like, hard to play against in the playoffs. So they're all, like, in the 6'3", they'll be 215, 220, 225 range. But I have, like, 4 of them kind of in a row because it's so valuable. How many times do teams want to fight for a big, strong third-line center? Yeah. Like, so when in doubt, if you can get one, go get one. And I've altered my lists, especially in the last 3 years, to try to mitigate the guys that have more risk, and I started pulling them out of that 23 to 32 range because I've been burnt in the past because of that.
Give me the most overrated player in the draft and the most underrated player in the draft.
Most underrated. Oh, I don't want to throw a kid under the bus, so I'm not going to do overrated, but I will do underrated, and I think it's command. I think at the end of the day, 12 years from now, we're going to look back when he's 30 and we're like, oh, why did we go get him?
I like that.
Right? Like I think his game fits for NHL playoff hockey as it plays today. So when I think about his off puck game, I think of Michael Backlund. And I have all the respect in the world. I would want a Michael Backlund on my team.
Yeah. Oh, so would I. I think most people would. Yeah, overrated. I get it. They're young kids. I'm just, there's a lot of guys get a lot of hype sometimes, and maybe you're not sold on. So I didn't know there was a guy. Last player, Smits is again, every tournament I turn on, he's playing in. You know what I mean?
That's the advantage of being a Latvian, right? And being an exceptional player, which is going to help him long term of understanding what I need to do. I find him very self-aware. So he's recognizing, okay, he's still in that experimental phase. And that's the danger of putting 19-year-olds in the American Hockey League or even like 19-year-olds in the NHL, because they still require the experimental phase. And he's still in there. So keep those young defensemen out of the American League as long as possible to let them try things and fail. It's okay to fail. It's fine. It's fine to fail, but you have to know how far you need to push it and be able to build up those habits. And I think Kevin Korchinski is an example of how dangerous it is to put a 19-year-old defenseman into the NHL, because what happens is they change their habits to survive. They get thrown into survival mode.
Lashunov as well? You put him in that category too?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, where what happens is they change their habits to survive because they're in survival mode, and then you look at them 2 years later and you say, "Wait a minute, he's not even close to the player that we drafted." Yeah, but you forced him into that situation by putting him in too much too soon. And then what he has to do is go back and change all his habits again to change his behavior. And that could end up taking a year or 2 years to get back into change all your neural wiring in your brain, because it's all neurological. You got to change all your neural pathways again back to what it was before. And that takes a lot of work. So what you're doing is you're messing with their identity of who they are. And that can really, players sometimes don't recover, or some guys don't want to come off that identity, right? And so there's that problem too. But that's a dangerous proposition. I know there's an opportunity to put 19-year-olds in the American League, and I cringe at that, particularly if they're defensemen, particularly if they're D-men.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think some of these teams that are rebuilding, they feel like, oh, we got these high picks, we got to get them going. Fans, the pressure from the fans, you're going to lose games, so okay, we're going to sell tickets, let's get these high draft picks in there. But
bring in veterans.
As Larry Clough told me a long time ago, I've never seen a player stay too long in the minors, or in this case maybe junior, but I've seen plenty that came too soon. So
and Larry Clough was great to me. Actually, back in the day, the Blues were having a hard time getting information out from Russia on some of their prospects and young players. So actually Larry contacted me through the PR staff. So he was asking around who could dig up information for us. So he asked me to do it. So I did that for him for a year.
He's the best.
Digging up intel out of Russia. Right? So I had connections through there.
Have a lot of teams contact? Has anybody tried to hire you?
I've talked to teams, but because of my because of what I was doing in my PhD, it was thought that it would be a conflict of interest. So I couldn't work for a team. So that's why I was working with Jason Bucco at the Pro Hockey Group. So that was the next best thing I could do. And Jason Bucco has been great to me.
Yeah.
Fantastic mentor. So perhaps one day, that may happen where I get an opportunity to work for a team. Or, that now that I'm finished my PhD, I can teach and work in research departments. So everything that I'll end up writing about is going to be about hockey anyway, because, I'm an obsessive junkie when it comes to hockey.
So I
can't get enough of it.
All the PhD stuff you're doing, it's all hockey related. It's not.
And so was my MBA. My MBA was in hockey management. So I took Brian Burke's program.
Okay.
So my master's was in hockey management. So I'm an economics major. And now this PhD was all on decision making and all about hockey. Now I could take my dissertation and apply it to any industry. I did that on purpose because it's about decision making at an operational level. And it's the how, what, and why of decision making. And you realize myself included, how irrational we really are as human beings. So it's almost to a point of being comical.
What's the youngest birth year or age group that you're scouting now?
I try not to. The U17's like 16.
Okay.
I like to let the kids. I leave them alone. Just leave them alone. Because the jump is so massive for them, and they're still developing who they are as an identity. The last thing I want them to see is some guy up in the rails writing reports on them, and they're going to know. Kids aren't stupid. So I just, like, unless you're working for a junior team, that's different. But for me, I like to leave them alone and let kids be kids.
Yeah.
Because I have a young kid in hockey, and I see what happens in our industry, and sometimes we're just pushing too hard with the kids and let them enjoy the game and let them grow. We have to remember, like, Alex Ovechkin didn't start playing hockey till he was 11. 7 years later, he was the first overall pick. Take a big breath, parents. It's going to be okay.
Ed Jovanovski went first overall, too. I think he started.
Yeah, and he played house and rec until he was about 13. So
Cam
5 years later.
Yeah, you don't want to emulate his game, but my podcast partner, he didn't start till he was 10, too. So,
and he turned out great.
He did.
So there you go.
He did.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites.
Yeah,
so
awesome, man. Listen, Shane, great stuff. I'll see you in Buffalo for the draft. Enjoy the rest of the combine and all of that, and we'll be in touch, man. Great stuff today. I appreciate you jumping on with me.
Anytime, Slick. Appreciate it. Take care.
All right. Have a great day. Great stuff from Shane Malloy. Again, listen to his stuff on NHL Network Radio on the weekends, Pro Hockey Group. You can find him on social media. Everything that he's involved in, at Shane Malloy, Malloy, you can find on his Twitter account. Just look him up and find all the stuff that he's got going on. Great reports and everything. But, you know, the Command kid that we were just talking about, Alexander Command, left shot centerman. I keep hearing his name a lot. And if he were to fall to 11, if St. Louis stays there, he would be just a fantastic pick. And we'll see where that goes with Alexander Command. We're in Command here on Hockey Sense, brought to you by First Community. Hope you enjoyed that conversation with Shane Malloy. Again, First Community, find a branch nearest you and find a bank account that works for you and your family, and do it today. firstcommunity.com. We love all our friends at First Community, Glenn Barks, Laura Alfeld, everybody over there with First Community. Everybody's doing great work over there. Again, St. Louis Lawn Care. Check them out, stllawncare.com. Get that lawn looking like Petco Park, baby. Blue Note Roofing, 314-920-5713. Let's take a break. We'll come back and wrap things up. Again, no Jamal Mayers on this edition of Hockey Sense. He's out for assignment. I may be out next week. You have to stay tuned. I'll put an update on Twitter, on social media. Scheduled to go on vacation just for a few days with my wife, a little getaway before things really get kicked into high gear as we get closer to the draft and then free agency. Hope you enjoyed that interview. Let's take a break. We'll come back with much, much more here on Hockey Sense, brought to you by First Community. Stay with us. All right, great show today. As always, again, Jamal will be back with us next show. Dirt Cheap Fun, your one-stop party shop. Download that app today. Dirt Cheap has been with us for several years here on Hockey Sense, both on radio and now on the podcast platform. Our numbers are going up each and every week, and we appreciate that. Hit that subscribe button. Let me know what you like. Always reach out and communicate with me, man. I love talking with the viewers and the listeners of Hockey Sense, brought to you by First Community. Mako, take your car in there. You have dent, body damage. Visit the Mako in Kirkwood. MAACO, Mako, baby. Great stuff from Mako. So Jammer couldn't be with us. You know, spas and more. I got a new spa, by the way, new hot tub. Jamal Mayers is getting the hot tub. He's getting the sauna. He's getting the cold plunge. He's getting all of it. Spas and more. Angie Hess, nobody does it better. She puts the in spa. 2 locations, Sunset Hills and Overland Park, Kansas. They have 2 locations. Mike Leahy, the owner, he started it all. But now Angie Hess is taking over and doing great things. It's an American hot tub and swim spa manufacturer located in Fort Wayne, Indiana. That's where you find Master Spas. And my Master Spa is beautiful. Jamal's Master Spa, incredible. the largest hot tub and swim spa manufacturer in the U.S. They've got those Michael Phelps chili goat tubs. How nice do those look? You gotta be kidding me. Check it out. Spas and More located in Sunset Hills, where we put the in spa. You can follow them on Instagram at Spas and More, STL. You gotta love that. And then, of course, Jamal is always brought to you by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers, locally operated since 1976. The largest retailer of tires and expert auto service. I love it, man. 43 store locations, offering all the different driving deals on the best tire brands, up to $275 savings on new Goodyear tires. Lots of other deals as well. Go to Dobbs.com. That's the website. Go to Dobbs.com. That's the site. Go to Dobbs.com. Click on it right now. Find out all the great savings you have. All right, that does it for this edition of Hockey Sense. For Aiden, for everybody, Shane Malloy, great stuff from him. And we'll get more and more information coming out soon. Who else is going to want trades? Who else is on the move? And what other exciting things will we have as we get closer and closer to the NHL draft? And prior to free agency, I'm sure Alexander Steen is going to speak, talk about his ideas and what he has going. And trust me, we'll get him here on Hockey Sense as well. I'm looking forward to getting Steener on Hockey Sense for the first time as a general manager. We'll have a fun conversation with Steener. There's no question about that. And Doug Armstrong, all the great stuff that he's doing, he'll continue to do for the St. Louis Blues moving forward, who's been one of our favorite guests that we've had on here over the years. All right, for Aiden, for Alex, for Maddie, for Jammer, for Shane Malloy, I'm Andy Strickland, reminding you to keep your head up and your stick on the ice. Thanks for all the support. This has been Hockey Sense, brought to you by First Community. Have a great day. Have a great weekend, everybody.